This is a 2023 Honda CR-V, the first year for the new 6th generation version of this crossover, which we first saw for the 1997 model year. And it's grown. Again, that's because the HR-V, which is also new, also grew by a lot. And in doing so, became viable for a small family needing a small SUV. That gave Honda the room to grow the CR-V even more. So they did, kind of putting it in the middle between compact crossover SUV and midsize crossover SUV. Really interesting. There are now 5 trims of the CR-V: LX, EX, Sport Hybrid, EXL, and Sport Touring Hybrid, which makes this specific car right here, my test car, which is painted in Canyon River Blue Metallic, by the way, the top of the lineup. As the trim names implied, it's also one of 2 hybrid versions of the CR-V, the other one being the Sport Hybrid. And it's the only one that comes standard with all-wheel drive. All the other trims offer it, but for an extra $1,500. My name is Robin Warner, by the way, an experienced engineer and magazine editor. And just like this new Honda CR-V, I am no taller, but also still growing. I review all kinds of cars, from a $25,000 Ford Maverick to a $425,000 Rolls-Royce Cullinan. I'll happily jump into Honda Accords, BMW M3s, and Porsche 911 GT3s. And I have fun every time. Please subscribe and join me. The base price for a front-wheel drive Honda CR-V LX is $29,705. The least expensive hybrid you can get is the Sport Hybrid, and that costs $33,695. Going for this top-of-the-line CR-V Sport Touring Hybrid costs $40,395, and that's exactly what this car costs. There were no options or accessories on top of that. Okay, with all that, now's a good time for me to pull over and show you around and inside this car in a bit more detail. The growth trend at Honda, and indeed the automotive industry, continues with the 2023 Honda CR-V. Not only is it noticeably bigger than the outgoing model, this is also closer in size to a Toyota Venza than its close competitor, the Toyota RAV4. Let's take a closer look. Looking at the front of the car, you can definitely see the modern styling language that Honda's been using, which we first saw with the 11th generation 2022 Honda Civic. And generally, I think it works really well here. We've definitely got a much stronger, more sharply vertical grille up front here. And I do also quite like this very three-dimensional open pattern of the grille. I'm a little less thrilled with this massive Honda badge in front, but it is also the trend that we see these days. Interesting contrast in colors here with this more polished metal look down here, the lower bumper right here and here. And we do have some vents here for air curtains of the front wheels off to the side. These headlights are really interesting as well. We've got this black piece bifurcating it with daytime running up here and the full headlight assembly right here. Pretty darn big assembly when you put it all together. I think the hood's got nice curves to it, and it just looks more muscular than it did before. But obviously, what's under the hood interests me a lot more than the hood itself. Let's take a look at that. That is a naturally aspirated 2-liter Atkinson cycle engine you see under there, transversely mounted across the side like this. That being said, Honda did do a pretty good job to get it fairly well tucked back. The center line of the front wheels is right around here, so most of it is on the front axle, but it's not overhanging it too drastically. I am a little bit surprised to see the battery so far forward, I'll be honest, because that's not going to help with weight distribution. But, you know, it's generally a nice, clean, and simple layout. And by the way, windshield washer fluid reservoir is right here. Looking at the car in profile, you get a better sense of how much bigger this really is. In fact, it is 2.7 inches longer than the 5th generation Honda CR-V. It's also a bit wider and has a longer wheelbase. The one thing it isn't is any taller. I'll go ahead and put the specs up on the screen right now so you can check those out, and let you know that I have a lot more information in the description. But you can also see in this profile a more squared off look. The A-pillars themselves have been stretched outward and rearward and have a pretty strong rake going back to the 2-box frame, and then that 2-box frame is just a bit more squared off. The rear end has a slope here and then just gets chopped off here, as opposed to like a sloping curve or anything like that. I do like the polished metal around the window trim right here. The piano black roof rails is a nice touch, and this character line that starts from the headlights and goes all the way back right to the taillights is a nice touch as well. Honestly, this is a good, straightforward, slightly more rugged shape than we've seen before, and I think an improvement. Those are 19-inch wheels here on this sport touring model. The LX trimmed CR-V gets 17-inch wheels, and many of them get 18-inch wheels, but top wheel gets this nice black finish 19-inch wheel. Here's the vent for that air curtain to wash air over the front axle to avoid a high pressure zone here. And behind the wheel is a strut front suspension, which is quite common for a vehicle like this, and in the CR-V works well. And in back is a multi-link independent rear suspension and the same width 19-inch wheels. Looking at the back of the car, you do have this subtle roof mounted spoiler right here and these interesting vertically mounted taillights right here. They do extend off to the side over here, and they are pretty big as well. They also extend into the center farther than you'd expect as well. But unfortunately, my pet peeve has happened here. We do have these fake exhaust ports on either side, and what's worse is this is not a dual exhaust tip system. It is a single exhaust tip right under here behind this. Such a shame and absolutely unnecessary. And this is a little much as well, this rear diffuser style little bit of plastic in back. For a compact SUV, you don't need that. But anyway, let's get to some very good news, and that's how much space we have inside. Because this is a top trimmed CR-V Sport Touring, it does have a hands-free liftgate opening. And that reveals 36 cubic feet of space behind the second row. And that's quite a lot for a compact SUV. You do have a couple of hooks on the other side here, and on the driver's side you have a 12-volt power port right there, but it is pretty straightforward. However, if you need more than 36 cubic feet of room, that is of course quite easy to do. And a couple pulls of a lever reveals 77 cubic feet of storage in a compact SUV and seating for two. That is quite a lot of space, but it is also a vehicle that continually grows. Anyway, I think this is ample room for my bike, but let's double check. Oh yeah, because of the hump of the second row, that's a little bit of a challenge, but the main problem for me was getting the bike in around the camera. Yeah, that's plenty of room. Plenty of room for a bike. Let's check out that second row. Now, Honda claims that we have more legroom than before, and that's easy to believe seeing how much bigger this car is. And before I even step in, I'm pretty happy with how much legroom I see. The seat bottoms are pretty high up, but the seat backs also have some new adjustments. You have 8 different angles that the seat back can be perched in. One is like super straight up. That does not look at all comfortable, but then you can go back 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And in the 8th position, you can see that that is pretty well reclined. This side over here is in the middle position, the 4th position. So that gives you a sense of how far back you can recline the second row. I am 5'11" or 181 centimeters tall, and look how much legroom I have here. The front seat is in a position I'm comfortable with, and that's plenty of knee room right there. Plus, the seat bottoms are indeed quite high, so I have good thigh support as well, and a much less than 90-degree bend in my knees as well. Also, on Sport and Sport Hybrid trims, you do get USB ports in the second row, You also have a decent amount of width back here. This is wider than I expected. And also, of course, you do get an armrest and cup holders. Oh, yeah. Because this is a sport touring trim, we do get leather seating in this car. This is the only trim that gets that. We also get a 12-speaker Bose stereo system, as well as the usual chunks of controls on the door, plus 2-position seat memory. There are a couple of controls to the left of the steering wheel right there, and you can adjust both tilt and telescope of the steering manually right there. The driver's seat does have the usual adjustments right here: fore, aft, up, down, seat back, and then you do get lumbar support as well. And you also get this nice orange stitching and the pattern right there, which adds just a little bit of color. It's a nice contrast to this very dark interior generally. Because the A-pillars were pushed farther back and more outward, that does improve visibility. And you can see we have a nice broad landscape to look out from the windshield, so that is nice to see. We also get a 7-inch instrument cluster right there. This is not fully digital, however. It's faint, but you can see the needle. The speedometer is an analog speedometer right there. But I think there's a better way to show you. Push button start is right here. That is a real gauge right there. The rest of it is a screen. And that means it's an adjustable screen. With this side of the steering wheel right here, you can choose from many different things. How about that? On the other side of the steering wheel is your adaptive cruise control settings right there. And down at the bottom, because this is a sport touring model, we do have a heated steering wheel. Quite nice. The steering wheel itself is a nice thick rim and a good diameter as well. This is a 9-inch center console touchscreen. That is standard on the EXL and Sport Touring models. The other models get a 7-inch screen. The 7-inch screen models do come standard with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but it is wired. The 9-inch screen models, the EXL and Sport Touring, get wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. They also get a wireless smartphone charging pad right down there, and also you get a couple more USB ports and a 12-volt port right there. You do get dual zone climate control. That is on EX and higher trims, as well as heated front seats. Beneath that, you do have a drive mode switch right there. That is hill descent control. You do have an electric parking brake and a nice and standard old school looking Prindle right there. Beneath that, a couple of cup holders, a little tray right here, and a nice deep lower center console storage bin. And you can put this little tray here or here. Looking up, you do have a couple of options for lights, and you do have controls for your moonroof right there, as well as a glasses holder right after that. But the privacy panel is manually operated right there. Okay, let's talk drive modes. Switch right there. You get Sport, Normal, Economy, and Snow driving modes. But you also get D and B. If you put the car in B, that automatically puts you in a higher battery regen mode, more deceleration from just lifting off the throttle. But you also have paddle shifters here, plus on the right, negative on the left. This does not have a transmission, so it obviously doesn't have gears to shift. What that does is adjust the amount of off-throttle deceleration you get. So in the B mode, you can have it down at this minimal setting, or you can hit the negative shift paddle right here to increase the amount of deceleration you get just by lifting off the throttle. And when it's at its highest setting, it is about 1/10 of a G of deceleration. You're not quite to one pedal driving levels, but you are approaching that. Anyway, this is something I will demonstrate once we get back on the road. So why don't we get back on the road? All right, let's dig into the powertrain. Just like the Honda Accord, there are 2 powertrains offered. In fact, they're basically the same 2 powertrains that are offered in the Honda Accord. The base engine, which is offered on the LX, EX, and EXL trims, is a turbocharged 1.5-liter 4-cylinder engine, but Unlike Honda's version of that engine, it makes a little bit less horsepower and torque, 190 horsepower and 179 pound-feet of torque, and that compares to 192 for both horsepower and torque for the Honda Accord. That goes through a continuously variable transmission, or CVT, and onto the front wheels, unless you pay that extra $1,500. But the Sport and this Sport Touring hybrid trims get a 2-liter Atkinson cycle hybrid engine, which is exactly what the hybrid versions of the 2023 Honda Accord gets as well. And unlike the 1.5-liter, the outputs are the same. That 2-liter Atkinson cycle 4-cylinder engine makes 145 horsepower at 6,100 RPM and 138 pound-feet of torque at 4,500 RPM. However, that combines with a 2-motor hybrid system. One is the drive motor, the second is the generator motor. The drive motor makes 181 horsepower and 247 pound-feet of torque. That's a healthy number. Combine that with the combustion engine and you get a total of 204 horsepower and the same 247 pound-feet of torque. By the way, that second generator motor makes 161 horsepower but does not ever connect to the drive wheels. Its sole purpose is to generate electricity for the drive motor and or to charge the battery. The gasoline engine does have both port and direct fuel injection, as well as a lot of the other modern internal combustion engine tricks that we have these days, but it is purely for efficiency. The engine's primary purpose is also to work with the generator electric motor and make electricity for the drive motor. The only time it physically connects to the drive wheels is when you're at higher cruising speeds, like on the interstate. Otherwise, it's disconnected from the wheels and the electric drive motor is what's doing all the work. And that means there is no transmission, only clutch packs between the engine and the electric motors and the driven wheels. However, ironically enough, Honda developed something called linear shift control, and the purpose of that is to mimic having a traditional automatic transmission. The engine revving up, shifting gears, dropping revs again, revving up again, shifting gears, dropping revs again. I find that really fascinating because I think this is a really cool setup, a really cool hybrid technology system, and I don't understand why you would want to hide that by trying to pretend it's something else. But hey, I guess that's the engineer in me coming out. And in that vein, this does also have active noise control. That uses the stereo system to have different wave frequencies to balance out what might be considered bothersome noises inside the cabin. That part of it's nice. Problem is, it also enhances the engine sound, which I don't quite understand. And that engine sound enhancement is turned way up when you're in sport mode. So I will not be in sport mode. I'm going to keep it in normal driving mode, and that's okay because the only thing sport mode does is speed up the throttle map. It doesn't actually give you any more power at any time or speed up the transmission because there's no transmission. And if you do get all-wheel drive in the CR-V, that can provide up to 50% of the torque to the rear axle. Okay, I mentioned that you have D and B on the Prindle. D is drive, of course, and B, I guess, stands for brake. That is to naturally increase the amount of off-throttle deceleration you get. The B portion of the pedal seems a little silly at first glance because you also have those shift paddles, which adjusts how much deceleration you get just by lifting off the accelerator. But there is something important about having it in B instead of D. When you're in D, in drive, and you want to have more off-throttle deceleration, you hit the negative shift paddle, it goes down to the highest level, and you get that deceleration. The second you hit the throttle again, the second you hit the gas, that goes away. And if you want the same deceleration, you have to hit the shift paddles again. If, however, you put it in B, it gets you to the second to highest level of off-throttle deceleration automatically, and if you put it to the highest level, it stays there for the entire drive. So I'm currently in the highest level, and I'm going to lift off the throttle now. It's not much deceleration, but it's definitely more than just coasting, and you will eventually come to pretty much a stop just by doing this. Now, if I instead go to the lightest, to level 1, and do the same thing, that is pretty much coasting. Maybe just the tiniest little bit more. It's nice when you're in B to be able to set a level of off-throttle deceleration you want and just stay there. Generally speaking, I think this is a great powertrain, and I think this is a great place for this great powertrain. It's a tiny touch underwhelming to have it in the Honda Accord as the top powertrain offered, but here it's a very competitive and stout powertrain. If I just floor it, I get pretty darn good response and good pull. That is healthy acceleration from this 2-liter Atkinson cycle hybrid engine. That would easily get you up to interstate speeds, good passing power, those types of things. Better still, you get pretty darn fantastic fuel economy. 40 miles to the gallon in the city, 34 on the highway, 37 combined. And that's the top trim all-wheel drive sport touring hybrid model. If you go with front wheel drive in the sport hybrid, it definitely does better. And if you get the 1.5 liter gasoline engine, it does worse, but actually not by all that much. Of course, fuel economy is incredibly important, but none of it is as much fun as accelerating. Of course, I had to test that. Let me show you now. Okay, everybody, time for an acceleration test. I do have the traction control reduced, and we'll see how this new hybrid powertrain goes. Coming to a complete stop. All right, floor the accelerator. Yeah, okay. Yeah, all right. Yeah, really not bad. Now, you hear what sounds like the engine running through gears. It's not. It is the electric motor doing the vast majority of the work, and that tune that I talked about earlier, making it sound like the engine's running through gears. There's no gears to run through. But the point is that is solid acceleration, considering that this is a nearly 2-ton SUV and that it has grown as much as it has, and that it can get 40 miles to the gallon in the city. Solid acceleration. Not groundbreaking, but solid. It's not just about powertrain in this new Honda CR-V. Obviously, it's a lot bigger. I showed you that already, but this is also a much stiffer structure than before. Honda says that the body is 15% stiffer overall, and they put a lot of work into specific structures, components right around the suspension mounts and stuff like that to really stiffen up that area of the chassis to help improve its composure and its ride. And generally speaking, I think they did a fantastic job. I think this rides really well. I have what I feel is a nice and comfortable ride, goes over bumps in the road without any trouble, plenty of compliance, and it also does not feel at all overly soft or floaty in any places. It just feels like a well-controlled, yet compliant and supple body. Another part of having a stiff structure is it makes it easier to get quiet. But Honda also added more sound deadening material to the floor. They added this foam, this expanding foam to help fill in gaps and stuff like that in the panels. And for the EXL and Sport Touring models, they also put in acoustic glass on the windshield and both front side pieces of glass as well to really help dampen out noise from the road. And all of that shows on roads like this, but especially on the interstate. Yes, I tested it there as well. Let me show you that. All right, everybody, time for a quick stint on the interstate. I have it in normal driving mode still, and I have traction control back on. This does, of course, have the latest version of Honda Sensing, which has a lot of driving aids as part of it, so we'll definitely give that a try. But it also has a lot of noise-reducing, cabin isolating equipment, so we're going to see how loud it is as well. Anyway, let's give it a shot. Cruise control is set to go with traffic right around 75 miles an hour. I also have the lane keeping assist, the steering assist on as well. So I'll go ahead and take my hands off the wheel. And yep, it is following the subtle curve in the road just fine and doing a pretty good job to stay centered as well. It is getting quite good, the Honda Sensing system. I think it's still not quite as good as lane tracing assist from Toyota. I still think that one's the best, but this is getting awfully close. Briefly, let me show you what the instrument cluster shows me. So the speedometer is analog, so we see that, of course, and I've currently got it set to four-wheel drive torque distribution just in the center of the tachometer, but in the center you can see it shows the two green lines next to the Honda and that everything's operational. You can see the cruise control is on the left and that the steering assist stuff is on the right. So yeah, it's nice to see that information. And generally speaking, considering that this is a compact mainstream crossover SUV, I'm really impressed with both wind and road isolation. Road noise is about average overall, but there's very little wind noise coming through here, and that is quite good. Also, the ride is plenty compliant, plenty comfortable for me, and the seats are also quite comfortable. It's quite a lot of support and good comfort as well. I could definitely see myself doing a long road trip in this car very comfortably. Overall, great car on the interstate. You wouldn't think of it at first glance, but yes, you can tow something in this Honda CR-V. If you get the hybrid models, you can tow up to 1,000 pounds. No, that's not very much, but yes, it is more than nothing. So it's a really stout bike rack or a really small trailer otherwise. You know, it's something. If you get the gasoline engine, which does have the continuously variable transmission, that does go up a little bit. You can tow 1,500 pounds, still not a lot. So what do we think of this 6th generation Honda CR-V? Oh, I think it's big. I think it's quite big. This is 3 inches longer than the Toyota RAV4. It's much closer in size, as I said earlier, to a Toyota Venza, less than 2 inches different. And yet, it still qualifies in many ways, especially in terms of fuel economy, as a compact SUV. So that makes it a compelling choice. One of the biggest benefits of the CR-V growing as much as it did is the amazingly large amount of space you get in this thing. 77 cubic feet with the seats folded down. That's an impressive number for anything even around this class. So if you're the type of buyer that needs to haul things around a lot, big things, this does it and does it very well. You saw how easily it swallowed my bike. And it also has a very grown up, very mature, nice ride, very quiet interior on the interstate given its class. So all of that is very impressive. Spending 40 grand for all this, that is a little bit harder. That is going to nudge out some of the potential buyers of this thing. If you go with the standard LX, you are in this car for less than 30 grand, but it's still not cheap, certainly. But if you're comfortable financially and have a small family and feel like something like the HR-V just isn't quite big enough, this is a fantastic choice. You have space in this, you have refinement in this, you have comfort in this. There are a lot of strengths in this. And it's nice that you can save some money at the pump as well. I'm Robin Warner, thank you for watching. And if you like this video, I would really appreciate you show me by giving it a thumbs up. Doing so helps me out quite a lot and I'd really appreciate it. Also, if something like the Sport Touring Hybrid interests you, you should also definitely check out the Toyota Venza. That is also a hybrid. That is in fact hybrid only. And it is bigger than this, but like I said, not by very much. And yet they are two very distinctive things. I got to review that not that long ago, and that's gonna pop up on the screen right over here, and I'll also have a link to that in the description. You should definitely check that out. And from there, I reviewed a whole bunch of stuff by now. Something's gonna pop up on the screen next to me. Hopefully it's something that interests you, and if you do watch it, I definitely hope you like it. Okay, goodbye for now.